Good morning. So in this session, I'm going to take you through an exam style question for the functionalist theory of education. Feel free to pause this video at any point to take notes, to complete the notebook as we go through. What the video is going to do is take you through the breakdown of the question to make sure that you understand what it is that the question is asking you to do. We're then going to plan the introduction, working out what the context is, then looking at arguments for and against, as we're going to be looking at an argument essay and how we can apply the item. Then I'm going to take you through a main body paragraph focusing on structure and how to hit band 5 elements using a paragraph, a modelled paragraph, which we're going to annotate. Then your task for this lesson is to obviously watch the video, which you can pause and play back as you see fit, but you're going to complete the planning sheets in your ISB, which is in notebook. If you've already done that, this is an opportunity for you to check it, make changes before I look at it. You're then going to complete the chain of reasoning conversation for what you are going to argue, whether you're going to argue for or against. And then finally, you're going to write your introduction and first paragraph. All of this is to be done on notebook. If you need help with how to use notebook or in accessing notebook, let me know and I will help you. Okay, so first of all, this is the question we're going to look at. Applying material from the item and your own knowledge, evaluate the functionalist approaches to the role of education in society. So the command words, as ever, are always going to be the same. They're all, regardless of whether it's an argument essay or whether it is a 20 marker or a 30 marker, our command words are always going to be applying material from the item and evaluate. And what that means is we have to use the item explicitly somewhere in our paragraph, in our essay, and that we have to show that we're aware of both sides of the argument and have come to a reasoned conclusion and a clear, distinct answer. Okay. The topic in this question, and let me change my colour, is the role of education. Okay, and that's what we were looking at just before Christmas. Our focus is functionalist approaches. Okay, and we know it is an argument essay because this question is asking us to evaluate functionalist approaches. Okay. So what would have been useful there is if we'd actually had it evaluate the usefulness of functionalist approaches, which is essentially what it's asking us. But for this question, the exam would have actually left out the usefulness side of things. So what the question is actually asking us is pretty straightforward. Are the functionalist approaches to the role of education in society, are they good or are they bad? Okay, so we've broken down the question. We're being asked, is it good or is it bad? So the next thing we're going to look at is the introduction. And as you remember, the introduction is broken down into context, content, and answer. So we're going to go through the context first and explaining what the context is and how we know what it is, the different types of context and what we can include. Then we'll go through some content points. I am not going to tell you the answer. I want you to tell me your answer. You are writing this essay. You are the one that has to decide whether you think that functionalist approaches are good or functionalist approaches are bad. Okay, so in terms of context, as we said before, context, you have to choose between the 3 different types of context. In this case, we've got background, definition, or trend. Background is when we use general information about the topic of the question, in this case functionalist approaches, to show the examiner that we are aware of the topic. We've got an understanding of the topic. Definition is when you have a key sociological term and a non-sociologist would not know the answer to that question, that term. They wouldn't know what it means. So you need to show the examiner you know what it means and give a definition. And trends are used when there is statistical information. Things like trends in divorce, trends in crime, things like that. When we have something numerical to work with. So for this question, where we're being asked to evaluate the functionalist approaches of crime, we're going to be using background. Okay, there's no key term, there's no sociological term there where where a non-sociologist wouldn't know the answer. We've got no statistical information. This is not a trend in any way, shape or form. So we're going to give background. And in particular, we're going to give two types of background. We're going to give general functionalism. I'm sorry, I can't write straight. And we're going to talk about the functionalist theory of education. Now, because this is the introduction, it does mean that we're being very brief in this. Okay, we're not going into masses of detail. This is going to be no more than 2 sentences. Okay, so we need to keep it very, very brief. We're just showing the examiner I know what functionalism is and I know what they think about education. Okay, so you don't need to go into all the different types of role that education plays in society. You don't need to mention thinkers or anything like that. Just along the lines of the type of theory functionalism is and how that applies to education. Okay, so remember the context is only about 2 sentences, but we're looking at what is functionalism and what do they think about education. Those are the kind of 2 key questions that you need to answer in those 2, possibly 3 sentences. Okay, so this is what you would write in that section of your essay plan. You need to highlight the box to say which type of context it is, and you need to then tell me what you're going to write. Okay, so next up we're talking about the content. So this is where we're showing the examiner that we know both sides of the argument. We know why it's good and why it is bad. At this point we have not indicated which way we're going to argue, and in the introduction you are simply identifying. You're not explaining, you're just identifying. Okay, so when we're doing this, we are looking at reasons why. So it's almost like you need to complete the sentences. So what I've got there is functionalism is a good approach because, and then you need 4 sentences that say functionalism is good because A, functionalism is good because B, functionalism is good because C and D. And then you need to think about, well, functionalism is bad because. Okay, what we're not looking for here is for random concepts. What I want you to do is I want you to finish the sentence. Now I'm going to give you 2 and then you are going to finish the other 2. Okay, I'm not just going to give you everything you need. You do need to do some thinking for yourself. So what I've got is, when looking at functionalism is good because it shows how education helps people to engage in society. It shows us how we are the role that education plays in helping us to live as a society, to live as a community. And this can link in with the idea of socialization or role allocation, the idea of human capital as well. So you could bring any one of those concepts into your explanation for this particular point, but the point is not functionalism is good because of human capital. That doesn't even make sense as a question. The second one I've given you is that functionalism is good because it helps us to explain how social cohesion in society occurs. And again, here we can talk about the socialization process, the hidden curriculum, and that bridging effect that Parsons talked about, going from the particularistic values to the universalistic values. So it helps to explain why we are able to live in a society as a community and not live in complete anarchy. But functionalism is not good because it ignores the negative side of education. Now, if you remember back to when you did functionalism with Miss Lovett and theory and methods, you will remember that functionalism is a happy, clappy, joyful, we're the hippies type theory. So everything's about positive, and so functionalists tend to look at the positives of education and how it helps society. And it can be argued that actually there is dysfunction with the education system. There are things like not everybody has a wonderful experience in school, but also there can be conflict between the values and the norms that are being taught in school and the values and norms that are being taught at home, which can lead to conflict between family and education, but also can create a internal conflict within individuals, meaning they're not in consensus, they're not happy, clappy and joyful. And the second thing I've said is about it's assuming children are passive puppets. The functionalist theory of socialization and the hidden curriculum is almost suggesting that children are passive in their recipiation. No, I've just made a word up there. In the way in which they receive the hidden curriculum. They don't think about it, it just is. Almost, I guess, like a hypodermic syringe. It's being injected into their brain and not allowing them to think for themselves. And that's a big assumption, that we just blindly accept the hidden curriculum and the norms and values that we're taught in school and at home. We do have choice, and the functionalists completely ignore that. So I've given you two here. You can either now pause the video here and do your other 2 points and come back to this, or you can continue through the video and then do the activities afterwards, up to you. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show how the next step, which is linking to the item. So in the item, we can link this social cohesion side of things to the fact that it says that the functionalists believe that education is an important agency of socialization. Okay. Now remember, when you're using the item in your essays, you don't need to quote, you can paraphrase. And what that means is using the information and using the words, but turning it into more of a sentence rather than a quote. That's not to say you can't quote, but it feels clunky. It doesn't, and it almost feels like you're chucking it in there for the sake of it without actually thinking about how you're using it. So it's better to paraphrase than it is to quote. Okay. We can also link this to, what was the other bit I was going to link it to? No, it wasn't that bit. Sorry, think brain's gone a bit doolally. But what you're going to do when you've come up with your other 2 points, see if there's anything else in the item that you can then use to link to bring the item into. Okay. Right, so we've got our arguments for, we've got our arguments against, we've got our context. The next part of the introduction is your answer. And I can't tell you your answer. You have to decide, what are you going to argue? Okay. Are you going to argue that it is a good approach, or are you going to argue that it's a bad approach? Okay. So let's look at how to structure your introduction. So this is looking at the paragraph itself. Now we already know that there are 3 elements: the context, the content, and the answer. So what does that look like in practice? Now I'm not going to give you the introduction because I want you to write your own, but I'm going to take you through that structure. So first of all, when we talk about context, as I've said before, the context lets the examiner know you have understood the topic. You've understood what it is that you need to do, and what it is you need to answer the question about, and you have an understanding about that area of sociology. In the context of this particular question, you need to give the background to what functionalism is and their general view on education. And as I've said before, this should be about 2 sentences, possibly 3, not one massive long one, please, but you do have to think about your readability and about your spag, okay? With content, we're identifying some of the arguments for and against. So you don't have to put in all 8 that you've identified in your plan. 2 or 3 of them, 2 or 3 from each side is perfectly fine. That just shows the examiner that you've looked at both sides. Okay, you can include more information in your main body. In fact, you're supposed to include more information in your main body. But what we're looking for is just, some would say that functionalism is good because of X and Y. Others say it's not so good because of A and B. Okay, so as I said, the context of this is some of the reasons why functionalism is good and some of the reasons why it is not. But again, we're only looking for 2 sentences. I'd say 1 sentence for arguments for and 1 sentence for arguments against. Okay, and then finally, that is your answer. You have to definitively answer the question. You cannot sit on the fence. The fence is barbed wire, it's electrified and it's on fire. You can't sit on it. You have to say whether it's a good approach or whether it's not. Okay, so what is your answer to the question set? And that has to flow through the entirety of your essay. You can't chop and change about once you've decided on that answer. That it's almost like, I guess you're trying to convince the examiner that your answer is the right one. Okay, now either way is right, but you have to convince the examiner. It's almost like a persuasive piece of writing, because you're saying, I'm right because of this, and this is my evidence for it. So in this case, is functionalism a good approach to understanding the role of education or not? One or the other. Okay, and when you're writing your answer, this is only going to be 1 sentence, but use the terms from the question. Turn it into a sentence. Okay. Use that question. That way you will be able to be definitive and clear, and the examiner can go, yep, there's a clear answer here. And without that clear answer, you won't have a clear chain of reasoning, you won't have a clear line of argument, and you will limit yourself to the bottom of band 3. Okay, so if you want to pause it here and write your introduction and then come back to the main body paragraphs, feel free. If you want to continue with the video and do all the activities at the end, as I said, you're free to do that as well. Okay, so the structure of main body paragraphs. Now we've gone through this a couple of times now, and I'm going to keep coming back to it, and I'm going to keep ramming this home to the point that it becomes second nature to you. That as soon as you go in to write an essay, you know exactly what you're doing. Okay, so we start off with our why. Why have you come to the reason you've come to your answer? So when we were doing that plan and we were doing the content plan section, when we were finishing off that sentence, depending on which way you're arguing, will form the first sentence of your paragraph. Now, it doesn't matter if the first sentence of every paragraph is exactly the same, obviously with a different point, because what the examiners are interested in is your knowledge, not necessarily, well, a little bit to do with your literacy, but they're not looking for elaborate language or wide vocabulary in that sense. What they're looking for is for you to be decisive and to have your reasons. So the first sentence, and again, this is just 1 sentence, using the terms of the question again, so turn it into a sentence, like we did in the plan, and be definitive. Once you've done that, then you're going to explain your point. You're going to teach the reader what this means. Okay, so here we're looking for about 3 sentences. Okay, you don't have a lot of time to go into massive amounts of detail in terms of how, like I would spend an entire lesson talking about a particular point. Here you have to be concise, but you have to show knowledge. This is showing off. Okay, here you are showing off, and you're showing off. Look at me, I'm a sociologist. And you are all sociologists in the making. We're only a term in, so still a bit of a way to go. But you are showing off. You're showing, look at me, look at all of this knowledge that I've got. And aren't I brilliant? Okay. You've then got your evaluation. You must evaluate in every single paragraph, you must evaluate. Okay, and here we maximum of 2. It must be, hang on, I'm trying to think which way around, less than the explanation. Your evaluation must be shorter than your explanation, because if your evaluation has more in it than your explanation has, then that should have been your point, because you've got more information for that. But again, signpost this to the examiner by using terms like however. That's the classic one, or on the other hand. Now in your course resource guide thingy, can't remember what I called it now, reference guide, that's the one. There are some sentence starters in there that you can use. Feel free to use them as you need to. As I said, I don't care if your signposting is exactly the same in every single paragraph. I really don't. At the moment, what I want to see is your sociological knowledge, and I want to see that you are able to structure your paragraph. The last part of the paragraph is the link. Now, this is not part of the assessment objectives. This is not AO1, AO2 or AO3. This is the kind of bread of your sandwich, if you like. If you think of your Y as one slice, your link is the last slice. And again, it's about restating your answer. You want to ram the answer down the examiner's throat. So you say it in the introduction, you say it at the beginning of each paragraph, you say it at the end of each paragraph, you say it again in your conclusion. Okay, keep saying that answer. And the reason we do that is so that you stay on track and you don't then go off on tangents, or you don't confuse yourself and start arguing the opposite way. What we want to see is this is where you're going to get that clear chain of reasoning. And again, this is one sentence just to reiterate the point that you're making. Now you've noticed I haven't actually put the application in there, the AO2. Okay, and that's because it floats. We've talked about this before, but it floats around between the why, the explain and the evaluate, and put it where it fits. Every paragraph must have some form of application, which can come in the form of the item, sociologist studies, examples, contemporary events, but there has to be something, okay? And put it where it fits. So if it's part of your explanation, that's fine. If it's part of your evaluation, fine, but put it where it fits, okay? Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a model paragraph. You cannot use this paragraph in your ISB, okay? Do not copy and paste my paragraph. I will know because I know my own writing. Copy and pasting helps nobody. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you in practice what this main body paragraph looks like in the context of the question that we're answering about the functionalist theory of education. Okay. So it looks quite chunky on the PowerPoint, but do remember that I am writing in size something like 22 font. When you're writing, if you're typing on your notebook, you shouldn't be typing in any size bigger than about 12. If you're handwriting, it's whatever size your handwriting is. But just because you write in size 22 doesn't mean that you're going to get more marks, because all I'll do is shrink it back down again. Okay, we're looking at the quality over quantity. Quantity is important, but the quality is more important. Okay, so let's look first of all at the why. As you can see here, okay, now my colours are not the same as down the side because I didn't realise the highlighter didn't have the same colours, but there we go. This first sentence, I've taken the words of the question, okay, and I've turned it into a sentence. The functionalist approach to education is not a good approach, so I'm clearly stating my answer. And I'm saying why? Because it assumes that children are passive puppets and do not have agency of their own. Now, when we use the word agency here, it's about decision making. If you have agency, you are able to make decisions about your own life. And the functionalist theory suggests that we don't have agency. Okay. I then go into my explanation, which I'm going to do in orange because that's close enough to the yellow. Here, functionalists believe that education is an important agency in socialization, blah, 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 blah. You can read this. So I've kind of identified the functionalist belief, and then I've said why this is a bad thing, why this is not a good theory. Okay, so I've set in that orange block that I've just highlighted there, I'm explaining not only, so I'm saying what the functionalists believe, but I'm linking it back to my answer. I'm saying why this, I'm criticizing that idea, the idea that children are socialized into the norms and values of society, and it's a passive process. Okay, I've then gone into, and I have got green here, I had my evaluation, which I've signposted by using the term however, and I said, but Parsons does point out that education provides the bridge between family and society so that we can live in a society. So it helps us, so it is a good theory in the sense that it helps us to live within a community, within a society. So it kind of links to one of the strengths of that we identified in our plan, but it doesn't have to. Okay, and then my link at the bottom here, which I'm going to do in red. Despite this, it's still not good because it's still seeing people as passive. What I'm going to do now is show you all the examples of application that I've got in this paragraph. Now, there's quite a few in this paragraph because I've used the item. And this is a really good example showing you how I've paraphrased rather than quoted. Okay, I've used the terms, the words that are in the item, but I've mixed them up a little bit and used them in a way that makes my paragraph flow, that makes it make more sense. I've also got key thinkers. I've got Durkheim, I've got Wong, and that is correct. His name is Wong. I haven't spelt it wrong. And I've got Parsons. What I've also got in here is an example, the existence of anti-school subcultures. Okay. So in this item, I've managed to get 3 elements of application. Now, you don't need that much in every paragraph. You need something, but you don't need all of that in every paragraph. So don't force it where it doesn't fit. Okay, but this is a good paragraph because I've got all 5 elements of a good paragraph. I've got my sociological knowledge in there and it's explicit, it's clear, and my line of argument is absolutely clear. Okay, so now just to reiterate your task, okay, for this lesson. So we've gone through the breakdown of the question, we've gone through the plan of the introduction, identifying context and content, and applied the item, and we've gone through how to structure a main body paragraph. So your task now is in the notebook, in Teams. The sheets are already there. I want you to make sure that both planning sheets are done. So all elements of the planning sheet, I want context, I want content, I want answer, I want the deconstruction of the question. I want you to do a chain of reasoning conversation, and you do need to do all 4 here because it is a 30 marker. And remember, start at the bottom and work your way up. And it's a conversation, so write it as a conversation. Think of it, don't just write one word in each bubble, finish the sentence, have the conversation, okay? Because that forms the start and the end of each of your paragraphs then. And then I'd like you to write your introduction and first paragraph for whatever way you are going to answer this question, okay? Now, ideally, it would be nice if you did it color-coded, but I think I might be asking a little bit much on that one. So as long as it's written in there, when you've done all of that, if you click submit on the assignment that is on the assignment page, I will then know to go in and check and give you feedback. Now, my feedback for this is probably going to be audio, just because it's easier and it's a new feature that I've just found and I want to play with. But I will give you feedback on this. Okay. If you have any questions or you are not sure on how to get onto Notebook or use Notebook or anything like that, please, please, please tell me and I will help you.